Yes, there it is. Good call, Kyler. Thank you. Genesis 24 is where we're going to be at tonight, and we're probably going to take, hopefully, we can get through it. There's not a lot of really complicated stuff to get through in Genesis chapter 24. There's just a lot of stuff to get through because you'll notice that there's a lot of verses here. So we're just going to work through it like we have, and wherever we get to is where we get to, and we'll pick back up next week. But, um, you know, just thinking about what's happening in the scripture, what we've seen so far in the book of Genesis in the first 24 chapters, and thinking about life for us, right, in 2026 and how things sort of happen. And it for a lot of us, the most important moments in our life don't feel necessarily dramatic. Now, we may have a lot of dramatic things happen, all right? I'm not saying that. But I'm saying those really important moments, you know, like I think of my wedding day, how important of a moment that was for me and for my wife. But there wasn't like, and I hope this is true for you, but maybe it's not. But there's no like thunder and lightning. It wasn't like, man, my cousins didn't get in a fist fight, you know. But that could have happened very well. But there's no going back to Genesis. There's no angelic encounter. Although my wife was beautiful that day for sure, and still is. There was no mountaintop fire where God spoke to us or anything like that. It was kind of just an ordinary day, but an ordinary day where everything changed, right? It's like uh, a day where you're just at the store and you meet somebody and you have a conversation with somebody, and it ends up like that becomes a friend, and you make all these memories together. And it was that one ordinary moment that kind of made all of that happen, right? Maybe it's the day that you took a new job. Like, it wasn't anything extraordinary. You went to a different place, and it began this journey in your life that led you to the place you're at. Maybe it's moving to a new place, making a decision, and then years later you realize that all the while, when you were just living ordinary days, God was writing a story that you couldn't see. Right? That God was unfolding something incredible, and you didn't even notice. Unlike Genesis 22, which is very dramatic, right? Which is taking your son up on a mountain, building an altar, raising a knife about to kill him, and God intervening and providing a ram. Like, that would be a pretty dramatic day, right? And then Genesis 23, even there's a part of that, right, where there's this immense sorrow as Sarah dies and she's buried in a cave, and there's kind of the fulfillment of part of this promise that God has made to Abraham. So some things are happening. And then you get to Genesis chapter 24, and it's just a story about Isaac and Rebekah. And it's just unfolding. There's no miracles. There's no visible appearances of God. There's no audible voice from heaven. And yet, built within this is an incredible picture of God using the ordinary to tell something extraordinary. Where God preserves the covenant line, and He does so through just a guy trying to find a wife. And within that, God protects the promise line, yes, but also the promised seed that we get in Genesis chapter 3. And He prepares the family through whom Christ will eventually come. And so, here's what I want us to just say up front before we read any verse in Genesis chapter 24, and it's this: God does His greatest work through ordinary providence. If you are waiting in your life for the burning bush, if you are waiting in your life for God to roll back the clouds as a scroll and write a word from heaven in the clouds for you. If that's what you're waiting for, those moments are few and far between the ordinary providence that God shows. Just God working in the everyday, mundane, ordinary life of humanity. And chances are, in the most important moments of your life, there's not going to be some spectacle. There's not going to be something sensational that happens. It's just going to be a moment of faithful obedience where you live out God's purpose in your life to bring glory and honor to Him, where you pray, where you look for His guidance, and then you take a step in faith, right, in the direction of that guidance, and then God works through that decision, and God works through everything that's happening in that ordinary moment to bring about this incredible story that He's telling that involves your life, the everyday, ordinary parts of your life. You know, we read the Scripture and we want our lives to be like Abraham, right? We want our lives to be like David and Paul and the apostles. Like we want to be extraordinary for God. But the truth of the matter is none of those men that I just mentioned are extraordinary at all. It's that all of those men, though, recognize that an extraordinary God is working through just ordinary men whose desire is faithful obedience to Him. And God does miraculous things. Genesis chapter 24, beginning in verse 1. We're going to read 9 verses to start. I read this one at the end of last week because I thought it was funny. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years. Know a few Abrahams. Not literally, but I know a few old people that are advanced in years. And the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh, that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but will go to my country and to my kindred and take a wife for my son Isaac. And the servant said to him, perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came? And Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land, He will send His angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. Now, again, pretty ordinary. But I want you to understand, we're going to read through these passages, and we're going to read through them over and over again, because I want you to understand the weight of what is happening here. Right? Abraham is old. He's advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed him in all things. Verse 1 of Genesis chapter 24 is the summary verse of an entire life of faith. It's literally the summation of everything that's happened in all of Abraham's life. And God kept every promise. Every promise. Every moment that they thought the promise of God was impossible. Every moment that they had faith in the promises of God, every moment they had doubt in the promises of God, and even through all of that, through all the failures, through all the successes, through all the mountaintops and all the valleys, at coming to the end of Abraham's life, God kept every promise, but there's one issue. there's one thing that isn't resolved, and that is Isaac has to get married, right? Because, newsflash, the promised line, the covenant line that God has promised to Abraham, if Isaac doesn't get married and doesn't have kids, that line stops, right? And so that's the lingering issue, right? The promise of land, of a nation, of blessing to the world hangs on this moment that is at the opening verses of Genesis chapter 24. And so it's a serious moment in Abraham's life and in his family's life. And with that comes a very serious oath. Right? Abraham said to a servant, the oldest of his household, who's in charge of all that he had, listen, I'm going to make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but you will go to my country and my kindred and take a wife for my son Isaac. So Abraham says, listen, he has to have a wife, right? This has to happen. But I don't want you to take her from any of the Canaanite women. Why? Well, it's not ethnicity and it's not culture. It's actually theology. There's a theological reason why Isaac cannot marry a Canaanite woman. And it's this: the Canaanites worship false gods. We're going to see that unfold throughout the rest of Genesis, but that's really what they are known for. All right? It's pagan worship. And so if Isaac marries into idolatry, then that becomes the moment that this lineage, this covenant line, basically it spiritually collapses at that point. And so Abraham knows something in all of this that we have to take hold of too, and that is this: that God's promises advance through holy separation, not worldly compromise. So it has nothing to do necessarily with the Canaanite people as people, but it's the fact that their theology is wrong. Why do you think later in the Bible Paul talks about being unequally yoked, right? The same sort of idea that's being addressed right here is that what relationship does light have with dark, right? That's kind of the conversation. Just like I would encourage any young person, like if you're a Christian and you marry a non-Christian, your life is not going to be easy. There are going to be a lot of really hard things that are born and foundational in that relationship because of the difference in theology. And theology affects worldview, right? And so there's going to be a lot of things that don't jive together. And Abraham is just recognizing this, right? And so what he's doing here is he is directing his family in spiritual matters that are more than comfort, that are more than romance, that are more than convenience, right? And so for us, looking back at this is a good thing for us to see, right? Because as people living in this world, like with families, right, it's important for us to take the same sort of mentality. The spiritual direction of our family trumps everything else. Right? Because eventually the comfort's going to be gone. There's going to be something that happens in your family that's uncomfortable. Right? And if you're not prepared to work through that spiritually, you're not going to be able to work through it any other way either. Right? Just like romance, there's going to be times where things are very romantical in your relationship. There are going to be other times where they're not, and you're going to have to work through that. And if all you have is a worldly perspective, if all you have is worldly compromise, then you know what you do? You go to a divorce attorney, right? It's the reason that no-fault divorces exist in this world is because, well, the easiest thing to do is instead of working our junk out, man, we'll just call it a day. You go your way, you go your way, and we'll just split things down the middle, or you take it all, or whatever, right? I mean, that's, and again, not to say that some situations don't merit that conversation, but the picture here is that as Christians in this world, we are in the world, not of the world, right? Our relationships have to look different than the world, but As Christians, that's true. You're unequally yoked, that's another problem in and of itself that gets introduced. So there are all these levels of things that are playing into this conversation that Abraham is having, and it leads. I think the question that the servant asks is a great question, right? Because he's like, okay, but what if no one wants to follow me back here? Like this is the land of the Canaanites. This is a pagan land. Now, where Abraham comes from, it's not much better, right? A lot of his relatives are pagans too. So that's not even the real issue. But the servant is like, well, what if no one wants to follow me back? Do I just take your son then? If no one wants to come here, we just take Isaac there? And Abraham says, no, don't take my son back there, right? And so his question is ultimately, well, what if she doesn't want to come here? Like, what if she doesn't want to live in the Mid-Ohio Valley, right? Or what if she doesn't want to live here? And Abraham says the issue is that's not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is see to it that you don't take my son back there. Why? Because Isaac can't leave the land of promise. Because Abraham believes. He believes that God's promise of the land is still 100% true. But what he's also seen is that he doesn't want to try and secure the promises of God through disobedience. And why would he not want to do that? Well, we've seen how that's worked out in his life, right? With Hagar and Ishmael and Pharaoh and Abimelech, right? We've seen that road. He's walked that road so many times. He's like, not on this one. He says, this is where I'm going to draw the line on this. We're going to err on the side of obedience. But really for Abraham, it's not even just him looking back on the past experience. For him, he has confidence in the providence of God. He says, verse 7, the Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house, from the land of my kindred, who spoke and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send an angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. But if a woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there. So Abraham is at a point in his life where he believes in the promises of the Lord, and he believes in where God is leading him in this moment. And so he says to his servant here that you go, and an angel is going to go before you. God is going to prepare the way. Now that makes perfect sense in light of Genesis chapter 22. That's probably still pretty fresh in his mind. So he's probably feeling pretty good about God making a way when there is no way, right? And so he's feeling pretty good about that. So he says, no, you're going to go. An angel is going to go before you. And Abraham is so confident in what God is doing in this moment that he says, hey, if you can't find anybody, then consider this oath that you're making with me void. Don't worry about it. At the end of the day, there will be no compromise, though. My son's not going back there. And so, Abraham doesn't know how God's going to do it, but he knows he's going to do it. Again, he's pretty fresh from that very position on Mount Moriah. So his faith in this moment is exactly what we talk about when we talk about faith. It's not the visible things. He is looking at the character of God. Listen, God has kept his promise all along the way. It's a pretty safe bet for me to say that in this moment, God's going to keep the promise too. That's his mentality in all this. And so, the servant is satisfied with what's happening. Abraham has clearly articulated what he wants to happen. And so, in verse 9, there's this oath that takes place, and the servant commits to do this, and so begins the mission, right? And so now the entire future of redemption now rests on this servant who's traveling hundreds of miles without nothing but a promise, right? So, another picture of faith in this, right? This guy is like, oh, okay, Abraham, like I'm swearing before not just you, but God, that I'm going to take on this mission, and you say an angel's going to go before me, and God has got this. Cool, I'm in, and here we go. And then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel down outside the city well of water at the time of the evening, and the time when the women would go out to draw water. And he said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to your master Abraham. To my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Yet let the young woman to whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who shall say, drink, I will water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. And before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her water jar on her shoulder. And the young woman was very attractive in appearance, a maiden whom no man had known. And she went down to the spring and filled her water jar and came up. And then the servant ran to meet her and said, please give me a little water to drink from your jar. And she said, drink, my lord. And she quickly let down her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. And when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also, until they have finished drinking. And so she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for all of his camels. And the man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. And when the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels, and said to her, please tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? She said to him, I'm the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. And she added, we have plenty of both straw and fodder and room to spend the night. And the man bowed his head and worshipped the Lord and said, blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master. As for me, the Lord has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman. And the young woman ran and told her mother's household of these things. So what happens here is that this servant prays something very specific. Now, I'm not saying you should always cast the golden fleece. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you should always say, hey, God, if you want me to do this, then when I go to this place, don't let the woman just give me something to drink. Let not my waitress just give me a cup of iced tea, but let her give a cup of iced tea to the whole restaurant, right? I'm not saying we should do that, right? But what I am saying is that this servant, very intentionally, he gets to this place, to this well, this sort of, which are the center of community life, and he knows that, and he very intentionally says, okay, Abraham told me, like, this person has to be willing, like, Isaac isn't going to come here, and so he kind of casts this before the Lord and says, listen, Lord, God of Abraham, my master, like, I'm here on this mission for him based on your promises, right, that you've made to him, so help a brother out, right? Like, help me out in this. And he prays, grant me success today, he says, right? He's praying, God, give me clarity, give me specificity, right? I want to know. Lord, show me kindness, give me confirmation, right? Because what's happening here is something pretty weighty. And so he petitions the Lord, like lays before the Lord, Lord, let not only the person give me water, but also the water of these 10, to water these 10 camels, which, just so you know, that's a lot of water, right? We're talking potentially hundreds of gallons of water. And so he's not asking for luck, right? That's not what he's asking for. He's not asking for a miracle. He's asking for the character of God to shine through in this moment. Because what he doesn't even know yet is that the desire for Abraham and for God, for the covenant bride of Isaac, would be someone who is humble, who is generous, who has a servant's heart. And what better way for that to be put on display than what happens right here? And in this everyday, ordinary occurrence of at the exact time the ladies go to get water, right? In Rebecca's life, certainly an everyday thing. She goes, she gets water, and there is immediate providence. In fact, before he had finished speaking, the Bible says, behold, Rebekah, born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with a jar on her shoulder. The young woman was very attractive in appearance, a maiden whom no man had known. That means she was a virgin. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. The servant ran to meet her and said, please give me a drink of water from your jar. What does she say? Drink. And when she finished giving him a drink, she said, let me go draw water for your camels. She just does that, empties the jar, goes and refills it. And the Bible says here, the man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. In this moment, the servant asked the Lord to intervene in the situation. And it's literally ordinary situation, like he asks for it. And then when God does, he's kind of dumbfounded. Right? He's like huh? Like, okay, God, I kind of expected an answer, but like this is quick. Right? In fact, before he even finishes talking, she shows up. And she does exactly what he asked for. Exactly what he asked for. Not partially, not even approximately, but precisely what he asked for as a sign from the Lord, if that's what you want to call it. I would call it providence of God. And then he stands there and he just like, I don't even know what to say. It's like I know that I believed, right, that Abraham believed this was going to happen, but like then it happens. He's like, man, wow, right? Like it's incredible. And when the camels finish drinking, the man, he starts divvying out the goods, right? He gives her a gold ring, 2 bracelets for her arms that weigh 10 gold shekels. And he says, please tell me whose daughter you are, and is there room in your father's house? And she said, I'm the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, who she bore to Nahor. So she added, we have plenty of straw and fodder, room. And he bowed his head, the servant, he worshiped the Lord, said, blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who's not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master. As for me, the Lord has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman. And the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. So he gives her gifts. And then, not only is a beautiful woman, right, who's not married, but she's of Abraham. She's one of his relatives. Like, like it's the situation coming together that it's just working out pretty good for them. And so it leads him to a place where he falls down and he worships the Lord, right? And it's like this immediate thing, man. He's like, okay, God is actually doing something here. Like, this is a little bit crazy, everything that's coming together like this. Blessed be the Lord who's not forsaken his steadfast love. Let me tell you something about this servant that we would be well advised to take hold of. When you learn to see providence at work in your life, you learn to worship real quick. When you learn to see the way that God works in the everyday, ordinary ebb and flow of your life, it leads you to a place where you don't have to think about worshiping the Lord. It's just an outworking of your heart. Because the moment that you are able to step out of the bed in the morning and put your feet on the floor, you say, man, this is a blessing from God. When God does that thing that you've been waiting on to happen, you've been faithful in your job, right? And you're praying, man, God, I'm just giving this to you. I'm going to work every day for your glory. And God, I know you're going to move. And then you do that for years and years and years, and then God moves, and it's incredible. But providence here has to pass through human decisions. Now, what I mean by that is I mean that the servant can't just club her over the head and take her back because all the stars are aligning, right? There's got to be confirmation. And I understand that a lot of things have fallen into place, right? But listen to what it says. Then the young woman ran, told her mother's household about these things. And Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. And Laban ran out toward the man to the spring. And as soon as he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms and heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, thus the man spoke to me, he went to the man. And behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside? For I have prepared the house and a place for the camels. And so the man came to the house and unharnessed the camels, gave straw and fodder to the camels, and there was water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. And then food was set before him to eat. But he said, I will not eat until I have said what I have to say. And he said, speak on. And so he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become great. He's given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male servants and female servants, and camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old, and to him he has given all that he has. And my master made me swear, saying, you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I dwell, but you shall go to my father's house and to my clan and take a wife for my son. And I said to my master, perhaps the woman will not follow me. And he said to me, the Lord before whom I have walked will send his angel with you and prosper your way. And you shall take a wife for my son, from my clan, and from my father's house, and then you will be free from my oath when you come to my clan. If they will not give her to you, you'll be free from my oath. And I came today to the spring and said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if now you're prospering the way I go, behold, I'm standing by the spring of water. Let the virgin who comes out to draw water, to whom I shall say, please give me a little water to drink from your jar to drink, and who will say to me, drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son. And before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her water jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the spring and drew water. And I said to her, please let me drink. And she quickly let down her jar from her shoulder and said, drink, and I will also give your camels drink. And so I drank, and she gave the camels drink also. And then I asked her, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. And so I put the ring on her I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her arms, and then I bowed my head and worshiped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who led me by the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. And now then, if you're going to show steadfast love and faithfulness to my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, that I may turn to the right hand or to the left. See, what happens here in the first part of the first few verses here is what happens when hospitality meets mission. Right? He goes into the home. They prepare a feast. But he says, hey, I love the way that you're treating me. But I can't eat until I say what I got to say. And so for him in this moment, the mission that God had given him through Abraham was more important than anything else. And what does he do? He just tells the truth. Right? He just tells them exactly how all of this transpired. He doesn't hold anything back. Right? He just says, listen, this is what happened. This is the way all this happened. I got sent here. Abraham doesn't want a Canaanite wife for his son, so he told me to come here. And again, the story we've read a couple of times, like he prays, God, I need you to do something here. I need you to work through this. And then God does, right? And he's telling them all of this. And he's like, and you're like, well, why does he keep telling everybody this? Because what's happening is that every time he's telling this story, it's reminding him and reminding other people of God's faithfulness, right? I mean, God has done something incredible. Like absolutely incredible. It's not that the stars have aligned, it's that the providence of God has manifested himself in the ordinary, everyday life of these people, and God is telling his story through their story, and it becomes an incredible picture across the board of the faithfulness of God. And so this servant, he's telling it over and over again because it's amping him up too, right? He's like, this is crazy, right? Abraham told me to do this, and then I'm like, okay, but what if nothing happens? He's like, man, an angel's going to go before you. And he's like, okay, cool. And now he's there, and an angel went before him, and he knows that now because he asked for something very specific, and God provides that something very specific. And now he's standing before the people. He's like, listen, I just got to tell you what God did because I think God is doing something, right? I don't think this is an accident. And you notice what he doesn't do? Not once in the story does he praise himself. He doesn't say, yeah, and I asked God for this, and this is what God did for me. Right? And you know what else he never does? He never credits coincidence. He never says, yeah, believe it or not, I just happened to this well, and this just happened to happen. He's like, no, I very intentionally asked God and sought God. And every detail of the story is God is moving in every single one of the details, right? And then I want you to hear this. In Genesis 24, verse 50. And then Laban, Bethuel answered and said, the thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Now, I am pretty sure that Laban and Bethuel are not believers. But in this moment, these unbelievers, pagan worshipers, recognize the providence of God. They literally say to the servant, this thing, they're like, this story is too crazy for even us. They're like, we're buying it, bro. We think that this has come from the Lord too. And he's like, we can't speak to you good or bad. right? And the thing about it is, in this moment, is that the providence of God becomes undeniable, right? So, how does this happen in our everyday life now? Like when something happens and you're like, man, I think of like the few times the one specific time that I had a really bad car accident. Like got knocked out, like woke up, car smoking in a ditch, and I'm like, how did I get out of this? Like, how did the only thing I have is a steering wheel and rash on my head? Like, how is that all that I'm experiencing in this moment? And in that moment, it's like, well, because God was looking out for me. That's the only explanation for it. And that's the moment that they find themselves in, where it's like, man, like I'm not even convinced. I'm not even convinced there is a God, but like something's happening, right? And they're listen. This is prevalent in the world that we live in right now too. There are a lot of people who consider themselves agnostic. Like I don't know. I don't really believe either way. But man, when certain things happen, they're like, like, okay. Like I could be convinced. Like that's where they are. And this servant's like, man, if you're gonna show steadfast love, going back to verse 49, and faithfulness to my master, tell me, and if you're not, tell me that I can go left or right. He says, I need you to make a decision. And of course, the next verse is like, well, we believe God's doing something, right? But he says, listen, I just want you to, I've been honest and upfront with you about how we got here. So I just want you to be honest and upfront with me and tell me whether this is going to happen or not. And so what happens next is when providence, the providence of God, meets personal surrender. Then again, Laban and Bethuel answered, said, this thing has come from the Lord. We can't speak to you, bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. And when Abraham's servant heard these words, he bowed himself to the earth before the Lord. And the servant brought out jewelry of silver and of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. And he and the men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. And when they arose in the morning, he said, send me away to my master. Her brother and her mother said, let the young woman remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that she may go. But he said to them, do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master. And they said, let us call the young woman and ask her. They called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? She said, I will go. So they sent away Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him. And then Rebekah and her young women rose and rode on camels and followed the man. Thus the servant took Rebekah and went his way. That's, man. Again, these people are just living their life. Right? Just getting up and going to work and doing the everyday things. And God steps in and works through that in an incredible way. So much so that they're like, they start saying things like, it's come from the Lord, and yeah, like let her go as the Lord has spoken to you. They're at a place where they're seeing that God is doing something. Right? And when the servant hears this, he bows himself, he worships the Lord, and he gives them gifts. Right? It's not like he's not paying, right? But he is showing them appreciation for what's happening here. Because he has no expectation that unbelievers are going to go along, right, with God's plan. Like that Even in Genesis chapter 24, that's an absurd concept, right? For people who don't believe to say, okay, like, we'll buy it. But it's absurd, but that's exactly what happens, right? And they say, well, okay, now that all that's done, let's eat, right? They must be Baptist, right? They handle business and then they eat, right? Just kidding. They're not Baptist yet. They will be when they get to heaven. Also a joke. When they rose in the morning, he said, send me away. And, of course, there's a conversation that happens. Says, give us 10 days. And he's like, man, God is doing something. Like, God has worked all this out. Let's just go. And so they're like, okay, let's ask Rebecca. And then she comes in, and she's like, hey, do you want to go with them? And she's like, absolutely. And so there's this sort of back and forth where the servant is pretty urgent in pressing and pushing toward the urgent side of things, while her family obviously is trying to delay this a little bit. But she's like, I'm going to go. Like, I'm going to leave home. I'm going to leave security. I'm going to leave familiarity. I'm going to leave future that I understand. Like, I'm going to leave all of that because no doubt she believes. I have no doubt she believes. Because I can assure you of this. If you came to me tomorrow as a family and you told me this exact story about what happened in your family, I have a lot of questions. All right? Like, a lot. In fact, I'm going to be on the family side, and I'm going to delay this a lot more than 10 days. I'm going to be like, listen, bro, you just showed up yesterday. Like, we need to talk about some stuff, right? But that's not what happens for her. She's like, no, none of this is coincidence. None of this just happened, right? She believes that God is working in this and through this, and she becomes a picture of saving faith. What I mean she says yes before she knows everything. It's like, listen, saving faith is not about having the answer to every question. It's about having the answer to the right questions. And for her in this moment, that's all she needed. And so they send her away. And don't miss this. But her family blesses her, and listen to what they say to her. Our sister, may you become thousands of tens of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him. What in the world, where in the world does that come from? Well, I have a pretty good idea. It's called the providence of God. God has been intervening in this situation the whole time, and God is certainly intervening in this. And they literally say to her, the Abrahamic promise is going to carry on through you. Now, how do they know about the Abrahamic promise? I have no idea. I mean, I have some idea, because if I'm Abraham and God has been doing all this, like, my family's surely going to know, right? Because I'm finna tell everybody about how crazy everything that God has done in my life has been, right? Like, and by the time I get to Isaac on the mountain, like, we got a lot more to talk about, right? And so I'm sure they know. And what they do is they speak to her, over her, the covenant promises that God has made. Again, the everyday, ordinary thing. They're sending their sister, their daughter away to be married. And they say to her, we're not just speaking blessing over your life, we are speaking the reality of covenant blessing over your life. And then we get to the climax of all this, which we're not going to get to right now because we have 2 minutes, and I am not that good, all right, to cover that in 2 minutes. So, joke's on you. We get to the pinnacle of the story, and then we stop. So, any questions tonight? You